This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. I'm a big fan of shave soap. I've been using different brands for years, and I recently gave Sterling's shave soaps a try, and I've been very happy with the results. Sterling's shave soaps give you a great lather and a frictionless feel that allows the razor to glide right over the skin for a super close shave. No skin irritation and a clean, refreshing feel with no soapy residue after. I can tell you without a doubt, it's simply the best shave I've ever had. And my wife has noticed too. And here's the thing. With the ability to purchase 1-ounce sample pucks, you can try out different scents to find the right one for you. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's December 26th, and on this day in 1993, an impromptu celebration after a touchdown turned into the standard, and now it's simply ritual. This was a Week 17 game between an 8-6 Green Bay Packers team and the 9-5 LA Raiders. And as it tends to be in Green Bay in late December, it was cold. It was the third coldest game played at Lambeau at that point, and the chill was certainly a hindrance for the Raiders. Their offense sputtered all day long. Of course, that may have been due to an aggressive Packers defense led by the Minister of Defense himself, Reggie White. The Packers sacked the Raider QB combo of Jeff Hostetler and Vince Evans 8 times on the day, and it was the defense that came up with the signature play that brings us to what we're talking about today. The Packers were up 14-0 in the fourth quarter. The Raiders had the ball, and like a lot of rituals, it started simply.
To try and help. And we've just been told that Jeff Hostetler has been taken to the hospital for observation, so it'll be Vince Evans the rest of the way, and Evans gets the pass off, but hit at the 37 was Randy Jordan, and LeRoy Butler picks up the loose ball. Butler gets the touchdown.
So to fill in a gap or two, LeRoy Butler made the hit on Jordan to jar the ball loose. Reggie White caught it, and before he was tackled, he lateraled it to Butler, who then sprinted to the end zone. As he crossed the end line, he pointed to folks in the first row of the end zone seats, and then Butler leaped into their awaiting arms and into Packers history with the first ever Lambeau Leap touchdown celebration. Since we're talking Packers, let's go back to 1960 and the NFL championship game between the veteran Philadelphia Eagles and the young and upcoming Green Bay Packers. As much as Vince Lombardi hated it, this game turned into a big lesson for him and the Packers. After forcing a turnover on the Eagles' first possession, Green Bay was in position to score some points, but instead of taking a field goal, Lombardi went for it on fourth down and he came up short. And then it happened again later in the quarter. So instead of a possible 6 points, the Packers had nothing to show for it. A Packer gamble did pay off in the fourth quarter when they turned a fake punt into a touchdown a few plays later to take a 13-10 lead. But the Eagles came back to score the go-ahead touchdown to lead 17-13, and that's the way it ended. For Lombardi, it was his first playoff loss, and it would also be his last. He said afterwards that he regretted not taking the 2 early field goals and then vowed, "We will never be defeated in a championship game again." For the Eagles, this was their last NFL championship until 2017, when Philly won Super Bowl 52. On this day in 1977, it was the original Mud Bowl. Now, there have been a host of well-known bad weather games played in the NFL, and this game was actually reminiscent of the 1948 championship game between Philadelphia and Los Angeles that we talked about on the December 18th edition. In this epic battle of man versus nature, the Minnesota Vikings were on the West Coast for a meeting with the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs and a rematch of the previous year's NFC title game, which the Vikings had won. The Rams had struggled in the playoffs against the Vikings in the recent past when playing outdoors in frigid Minnesota weather. So LA was happy to be getting the Vikings at home in the warmth and sunshine of California for this one. Except it was anything but sunny and warm. Instead, Southern California was hit by a torrential rainstorm leading up to this game, and it changed the dynamics for sure with water puddling at midfield prior to kickoff. Vince Scully called the action for CBS that day, and he alluded to the rough field conditions just prior to kickoff.
And Fred Cox, the first thing, he will have to negotiate the swamp for at least 5 yards before kicking the ball, and that will be no easy task.
These two teams had met in the regular season back in October, with the Rams winning that one 35-3 on a Monday night. In addition, Vikings quarterback Fran Tarkenton had been injured in that previous matchup, and he was still out for this one. So instead, it was backup QB Bob Lee, also known as the General, who was called on to lead Minnesota on this day. Head coach Bud Grant wanted to air it out in the early part of the game before the monsoon turned the field into a total quagmire. Here's Vince Scully again.
3rd and 10 from the Viking 30. The Rams, by the way, had 36 sacks this year. Last year, they had 45, so they slacked off a little bit. Bob Lee, looking to release, goes down the left side, and it's complete to Ahmad Rashad for the first down to the 41-yard line. Rashad, who led the NFC with 51 passes this year, goes up in the air to make
Lee completed all 5 of his pass attempts on that first possession. The Vikes' opening drive culminated in a 6-yard Chuck Foreman TD run and a 7-0 lead for Minnesota. At that point, the field really started to deteriorate. Players were slipping and sliding when trying to make cuts or when the quarterbacks were trying to set up in the pocket to throw, so it turned into a ball control, run first, run second, run it again kind of game. In fact, Lee would only attempt 3 passes in the second half, and only one of those found its mark. By the fourth quarter, the players were covered by so much mud, the only way to really tell the two teams apart was by the helmets. The Vikings scored their second touchdown of the game in the fourth quarter when Sammy Johnson went over from the 1 to give Minnesota the 14-0 lead. On the ensuing kickoff, whether it was a squib kick like play-by-play man Vince Scully called it, or an intentional onside kick, or whether Vikings kicker Fred Cox simply slipped when he planted his left foot and it turned into an inadvertent onside kick that actually paid off for the Vikings, is up for debate. The kick pinged off a Ram, and the Vikings recovered it in the midfield mud pit. It was one of 3 turnovers that LA had on the day. No points came out of the turnover, but it did run some precious time off the clock. The Rams finally got on the scoreboard with just under a minute to play in the game after Pat Hayden hit Harold Jackson for a short TD pass. The Rams pulled off a successful and planned onside kick, and they had a chance to tie the ball game in the final seconds, but Hayden's heave was intercepted at the goal line, and the Vikings were off to the NFC Championship game again. Minnesota would lose the following week to the eventual Super Bowl champs, the Dallas Cowboys. So the Vikings may not have won the Super Bowl that year, but at least on this day in 1977, they conquered the Rams and the elements to win the Mud Bowl. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 1919, the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees met in secret, and they hammered out a deal for Babe Ruth. The Red Sox agreed to sell the rights to Ruth to the Yankees for $125,000. This all came about because Ruth wanted more money from the Red Sox. He'd signed a 3-year, $30,000 deal with the Sox prior to the 1919 season, and then he'd gone on to lead the league with 29 home runs and 113 RBI. After the season, Ruth demanded a deal worth $20,000 a year, but the Sox were not budging, and the Babe was willing to sit out, saying, "I will not play with the Red Sox unless I get $20,000. You may think that sounds like a pipe dream, but it is the truth. I feel that I made a bad move last year when I signed a 3-year contract to play for $30,000. The Boston club realized much of my value, and I think I am entitled to twice as much as my contract calls for. Well, Boston's Harry Frazee said the deal on this day was too good to pass up, and after a 6th-place finish in 1919, he figured that the money could be spent to replace Ruth and get back to winning championships. They'd won 5 of the first 15 at this point, 3 of those with Ruth, and this was supposed to start another run. Instead, it turned into an 86-year World Series championship drought for the Red Sox, and, on the other side, an incredible championship run for the Yankees. While the deal was agreed upon on this day, it was not announced until January 5, 1920. Ruth got his $20,000 a year contract with New York to play the 1920 season. And in 2004, Peyton Manning threw his 49th TD pass of the season to top Dan Marino's record for touchdown passes in a year, set 20 years prior. That record has since been bested twice. Tom Brady upped the mark to 50 in 2007, and then Peyton reclaimed the record in 2013 with 55 touchdown passes, which is still the current record. And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact.
Say what?
The tusk of a narwhal is actually a tooth, and it can grow up to 9 feet long.
What did you say?
Hey, this is Steve White, the host of This Day in Sports History. Thanks for listening to this episode. One quick thing, I'm up for an award. I made the short list for the best sports talk podcast in 2024, and there are some heavy hitters in this category, such as the Kelsey brothers, Scott Van Pelt, and Bill Rhoden. Now, there's not much hope for me winning this category against those guys, but if you're a fan of the show, then you may know that one of my favorite sports movies is Will Ferrell's Semi-Pro, and one of the things in that movie is his effort to get his team to finish in 4th place. So I've kind of poached that idea and would love for you to help me finish in 4th place. I put a link in the show notes that will take you to the page where you can vote. You can only vote once in the category, so if you would cast your vote for my podcast, that would be awesome. Appreciate it. Have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.